Welcome back to Tales of Knights and Magic. Subscribe if you like, and now get comfortable, and enjoy this glimpse into the world of fantasy. Moonlight sifted through skeletal oaks over the half-forsaken cemetery, painting tombstones in silver and shadow. Corvian moved between fractured crypts like a phantom, robes drifting, boots silent on cracked marble. He paused at each fresh mound, pressing a gloved hand to cold earth and closing his eyes until he felt the faintest flicker of unrest. An echo of soul left too long to wander. He had learned this at his mother's knee, watching her fallen prey hauled from the gutters of Edrol's Cross. She'd told him spirits left their bone hollows restless, hungry for remembrance. Corvian had learned to listen. It was how he found the richest graves, hidden vaults, sealed behind false stones, shattered sarcophagi, jade-lined coffins. Tonight's cut was especially rewarding. A low crypt tucked beneath a leaning mausoleum that hummed with desperate aching. The slab gave under his picks, and he slipped into the tomb's stale hush. Candles long guttered away, leaving only dust motes drifting through the moonbeams from above. At the far end, amid scattered bones and tarnished chalices, lay a stone bier carved with serpents. Something about its pull made his own heart tighten. An invitation or a warning. Prying open the lid, Corvian revealed a single corpse, robes lined with silver thread and hands clasped over a leather-bound book. He beckoned the lingering souls, letting his gift swirl around the corpse until their memory mist gathered at the grimoire's cover. He lifted it free. The book hummed, spine creaking as though it still drew breath. In the weeks that followed, Corvian learned the tome's dark rhyme, how to draw a captive soul into his vessel, through veins of spirit ink traced on his palms, how to read its memory film, like an astral play, and when the flame of power burned too hot, how to release it in a flare of spectral fire that seared muscle and mind, fueling his own body with uncanny strength. His first trial came in a ruined watchtower, where bandits fell before his sudden prowess dropped not by steel but by bursts of ghost fire from clenched fists. Word spread of a living wraith, and for the first time Corvian felt the bright stir of new possibility. No longer bound to moonlit tombs, he donned a traveler's cloak and set out for the wider world. He learned to impersonate marks from their own stolen souls, mimicking a noble's bearing to slip through castle gates, borrowing a dungeoneer's skill at traps to navigate forgotten vaults. He never killed needlessly when a guard fell. It was by his own cunning, never his mercy. But he would not hesitate to burn a soul raw if it meant escape. In market towns and caravan stops, he gathered companions, the exiled minstrel whose laughter chased away his darkest echoes, the tomb warden who taught him the lore of crypt spiders and bone lichens, the merchant's daughter who bartered rare herbs for whispered necromantic secret. They brightened his road, and in turn he protected them with newfound power, forging bonds that did not rely on the grand sweep of prophecy, but on simple trust. Yet Corvian never forgot the emptiness of the half-forsaken cemetery, nor the ache of that necromancer's book cradled in his arm. He would keep walking through haunted forests, atop sun-bleached battlements, beneath desert moons, seeking ever more potent souls whose memories held forgotten techniques. Each new memory expanded his arsenal. A duelist's ghost taught him the flash step. An archmage's shade whispered the art of binding flame to bone, and each time, he carried their embers forward, fueling the next stage of his ascent. He was not a hero, but neither was he a villain. He was Corvian, grave robber turned soul prospector, cunning, merciless when needful, charming when it suited him, and his story had only just begun. The road stretched on, feet stirring ash and dust, and distant hopes, as he slipped into shadow once more, hungry for power, fearless of darkness, and determined to claim the highest throne of might in a world built upon tombstone. Mist clung to Corvian's boots as he stepped off the rickety pontoon into Fenmarsh, a low-lying quagmire ringed with cypress trees draped in silvery moss. The air smelled of rot and sweet fungus, punctuated by the distant croak of marsh frogs and the flap of unseen wing. He adjusted the grimoire's satchel on his shoulder and drew a slow breath. Here, rumor said, lay the Burrow Spire crypt, a half-sunken tomb cradled by tannin dark waters and guarded by horrors born of hollowed bone. Corvian's companions trailed behind, Morella the minstrel, cloak stained green with riverweed, Bryn of the tomb wardens, a tall half-elf woman whose gauntleted hands never strayed far from her spade, and Lisette, the merchant's daughter, quick with both coin and knife. In the ragged lantern light of dusk, they formed a quartet equal parts laughter and purpose. Do keep your wits about you, Morella whispered, strumming a soft chord on her lute. Swamp gas will fool a man's eyes 10 times out of 10, and bog wraiths will fool his heart, Bryn added, voice low and keen. She tapped the haft of her shovel with practiced insistence. The crypt's guardian is said to be the shade of Queen Virelia, a noble necromancer who bound her own spirit to this place. Cross her halls and she'll strip your memories like pages from a tome. Corvian's lips curved in a thin smile. He tucked the grimoire beneath one arm. Perfect, he said. I could use a shade's memory. They followed a narrow boardwalk, planks slicked with marsh scum toward a half-collapsed archway set in a tumbling brick wall. Overgrown ivy curled around the keystones, and within the arch's shadows, something stirred. A slender shape hunched among skull-studded bone. Bryn halted them with a raised hand. Bucklers up, they drew thin blades and lantern light flared golden against tarnished steel, chasing the mist back. Corvian flexed his fingers, feeling the faint pulse of newly mastered soul flame in his veins. Tonight, he intended to test it. A low moan rattled the air as the hunched shape straightened into a tall, emaciated figure, skin bleached like bone, robes trailing in webby tatters, eyes glowing dimly beneath a funeral veil. The shade of Queen Virelia, pale, silent, half-seen. It raised a gauntleted hand and drifted forward without a footstep. Morella gasped, but Corvian stepped ahead. The shade paused at his approach, nostrils flaring with cold dread. Corvian drew a slow breath and whispered the invocation of binding words lifted from the necromancer's grimoire. Soul unmoored, come to me, share your past, your memory, breath of flame, ignite, and free. Show me what can set me free. His palm glowed faint silver in the lantern's beam. The Shane's eyes widened, memory threads unraveling. A vision of Aurelia at her coronation, draped in mourning silks, of her first forbidden ritual, burning her patron's soul to restore her lover's life, of the betrayal that left her tomb sealed and her name cursed. Corvian saw it all in surges of frozen pain and incandescent regret, and he felt that soul flame inside him roar. He plunged his palm toward the shade. The wraith's form flickered, armor clanking like rusted chains, then burst in a silent flare of cold flame. The glow washed over Corvian's body in a jolt of power. His limbs tingled, his heart hammered, and he staggered back with the sudden weight of all that grief. Then, as quick as it had come, the flame subsided, and the shade lay prone, a broken husk of moonlight. Morella rushed forward, lantern held high. By the gods, Corvian, are you well? Corvian nodded, still tasting the shade's sorrow on his tongue. He knelt and drew a vial of spectral silver oil from the grimoire's inner pocket. With a deft twist, he poured a drop onto the husk's chest, and it transformed into a small carved bone token stamped with Virelia's sigil. Corvian pocketed the token, feeling a new technique settling behind his ribs. Soul Flare Step, a blink strike fueled by ignited spirit, capable of crossing 20 paces in a heartbeat of flame. Bryn lowered her shovel and let out a low whistle. Impressive, but the queen's crypt still await. They entered the tomb through the open arch, passing through a low hall lined with niches, where emerald moss glowed like drowned lanterns. Every step echoed on flagstones carved with funeral hymns. At the far end stood a granite door bound in iron, its runes humming faintly under Corvian's touch. He traced one with his finger, the rune for passage. It glowed bright. The door swung inward without a groan, and they crossed into a vaulted chamber ringed with half-fallen sarcophagus. Stalactites dripped in steady rhythm as the lantern's glow revealed a mosaic floor. Virelia's final incantation woven in colorful tile. Corvian recognized segments from his grimoire, spells to bind or banish a restless spirit. He could deactivate it but chose instead to observe. He stepped onto the mosaic's center, and the floor shimmered with flickers of blue light. From the sarcophagi rose 4 skeletal guardians, a knight in half-shattered plate, twin mages with staffs of obsidian, and a hulking shape of bone and sinew. Queen Virelia's personal guard. They advanced in unison, clattering bones and rattling armor, moving to encircle the intruders. Bryn snarled and hefted her shovel. Morella drew a slender rapier from beneath her cloak. Lisette disappeared behind a pillar, daggers at the ready. Corvian, heart thrumming, touched the bone token in his pocket and whispered another phrase from the grimoire. Bone to bone, spirit to flame, grant me strength in Shadow's name. His palms erupted in ghost-white fire. With a soul flare step, he blinked between 2 mages, searing their skulls with spectral claws. Their forms collapsed, flame dissipating into ash. The heavy knight swung a rust-slicked sword, but Corvian met it with a palm strike of ignited ember and shattered the helm. His body glowed like a lantern as he moved with inhuman speed, dodging the guard's club and delivering a final blow that shattered its ribcage into glowing motes. In the sudden hush, the 3rd skeletal mage wilted at Bryn's shoveled strike, and Morella's blade slipped between the last bone's gaps. Corvian exhaled, the fire in his hands flickering out. He felt both exhilarated and hollow. Another 4 souls added to his power, but more hollowed shells beneath his feet. He retrieved 2 more tokens, each etched with the Guardian's rune, and tucked them into his pouch alongside the Queen's. Enough excitement for one night, Lisette quipped, stepping from behind the pillar. Corvian offered a wry grin. Hardly, for the crypt's heart still awaits. They descended a short flight of stairs into a circular vault, where the walls were carved with swirling glyphs of life and death. In the center sat Virilia's sarcophagus, a coffin of obsidian etched with her final incantation, locked by a 7-pointed seal. Corvian laid the grimoire open on its lid, and traced the seal's edges with bone whisper ink. As he worked, the glyphs on the walls pulsed, and a low hum filled the chamber, an echo of Virilia's own heartbeat in death. "Careful," Bryn murmured. "This is where legends say the queen's soul still clings." Corvian dipped his finger in the ink and whispered, "Queen of ashes, queen of woe, release your truth so I may know. From bone and flame, from past undone, reveal the secret, life or none." The seal shattered in a splash of inkwell black flame, and the coffin's lid slid aside. A single gust of wind, impossible in this closed vault, rippled through the chamber, carrying a voice soft and regal. "So you have come at last." From the coffin rose Queen Virilia's shade, regal and terrible in one. Her form shimmered in hues of silver and ash, eyes twin embers that flickered with ancient longing. Corvian stepped forward, grimoire held open before him. "I seek your memories," he said, voice steady. "Grant me your final wisdom, your high-level rights, so that I may continue my path." Virilia regarded him with both pity and pride. "Many have come to plunder my bones," she whispered, "but you alone ask for memory, not for flesh." "Very well." Corvian touched the shade's flickering form with a gloved hand ringed in soul flame. Memories erupted around him in kaleidoscopic visions, a million chanting acolytes, under a moonlit ziggurat, the forging of Virilia's crown of spires from stolen dragonhorn, the last rite that bound her soul to this crypt, offering her life an eon beyond death. Corvian drank it all, each fragment furnishing a new technique. Crown of the fallen, a spectral shield of bone and flame. Necrotide surge, a wave of cold fire that can sweep foes from stone. Echo of lost voices, a whisper spell that bends minds with ancient truth. When the vision ceased, Corvian staggered backward, heart pounding. Virilia's shade drifted forward, laying a spectral hand on his shoulder. "Use these gifts wisely," she said. "But know this, soul hunters like you must guard against becoming the shade you consume." She bowed her head, and dissolved into drifting ash. Silence reigned. Corvian closed the grimoire, sealing Virilia's final rites within its pages, and tucked away the last bone token. He rose, face pale with wonder and exhaustion, but eyes bright with purpose. South, the moon had dipped low, and the first pink fingers of dawn touched Fenmarsh's mist. Corvian gathered his companions in the crypt's entrance. Mirella offered him a flask of spiced wine. He drank deeply. Bryn wiped her blade free of ash. Lisette readied her purse of dried meat. "Are we done?" Corvian asked, feeling the weight of new power thrumming in his limbs. "For now," Mirella said, voice soft with awe. "Shall we see what the world beyond Fenmarsh holds?" Corvian slung the grimoire over his shoulder and fastened his cloak. "Onward," he said. "My next target awaits somewhere grander than a broken marsh crypt." Above them, the oaks of half-forsaken cemetery murmured in the wind, and buried souls whispered Corvian's name in both gratitude and fear. He smiled to himself. The grave robber was no longer powerless. He had ignited the souls of kings and queens, and now he would wander ever upward, hungry for more memories, more power, and more secrets buried beneath the world's forgotten bones. The road stretched before him, moonlit, mist-shrouded, and infinite, and Corvian strode into dawn with soul flame in his veins and destiny at his heel. The sea breeze off Tidehaven carried odors of salted fish, spiced rum, and distant storm, and its cobbled quay hummed with activity even before dawn's first gray light. Corvian stepped ashore beside a yawning merchant galleon, the bone-forged sloop moored behind him. With the dragon's heart sealed at the threshold gate, and the citadel trials complete, he had set his sights on something both simpler and far more devious: wealth. True power, he had learned, often lay not in arcane might but in gold purse and influence. Tidehaven was the perfect hunting ground, a sprawling port of narrow canals, sunlit plazas and dark alleyways where ships of every flag moored for trade. In the shadow of the lighthouse of Tides, an ivory tower crowned with a living flame, Corvian gathered his companions, Morella, Bryn, and Lisette, each eager for coin and a new city's promise. "Market opens at first light," Lisette reminded him, adjusting her satchel of trade goods. "If you want to case the guild vault, we'll meet on tray." Corvian's lips curved. "Then we'll create one." He drew the grimoire from his pack, tracing the new rites he had learned beneath the Tempest Archipelago. With a whispered invocation, his eyes gleamed with the stolen reflection of a recently consumed merchant's soul, and his posture shifted into that of an Alderan silk trader arrived with high-status letters of credit. Under his touch, Morella's lute converted into an ostentatious mercantile ledger, Bren's shovel became a ledger-sized ledger, and Lisette's merchant's cloak embroidered itself with the crest of House Silver. Together they swept through the lighthouse gate, greeted by bored guards accustomed to ribbon-stamped nobles and visiting dignitaries. Within the guild district, massive warehouses rimmed the canals and the guild vault loomed at its heart, a squat granite cube ringed by barred windows and portcullis-strength iron doors. Outside, gilded lanterns hung from carved hooks of dragon bone. Merchants, ogres, scribe gnomes, and lizard folk queued with bundles of coin, awaiting the day's business. Corvian stepped forward, arms outstretched in deference. "Good sirs, forgive my intrusion," he said in measured tones, lifted from the silk trader's memory. "I am Corvian Alderan, here on behalf of House Velskor traders in exotic spices and rare silks. I require immediate access to deposit a consignment of crimson orchid oil." A gray-bearded cashier with reptilian eyes narrowed at him. "No appointments today, sir. You'll have to wait your turn." Corvian inclined his head. "Of course," he said, but as the cashier shifted his gaze, he laid a finger softly against the back of Lisette's hand, and she slipped the veil of illusions over the barred windows, each pane briefly rippling as though water blown. The guard's gaze flickered and he blinked. Corvian's impostor voice softened. "Could you escort us inside, milord? The estate's coffers lie waiting." The cashier's reptilian eyelids drooped. "Right this way." He turned and opened the nearest door with a curt knock. Moments later, Corvian and company stood in the vaulted interior of the guild vault's foyer. Rows of iron-clad ledgers on polished shelves, the floor tiled with inlaid brass runes, ensuring no magic could pass unnoticed. Corvian paused, letting the veneer of silk trader soak into his posture. He swept aside the hood of his cloak to reveal impeccably styled hair and a silver-buckled signet ring, bearing Velskor's crest. Lisette and Bren flanked him like silent porches. Morella trailed, pretending to adjust ledger scrolls under her arm. The cashier gestured ahead. "Vault door is there, neutralized by our warding circle." He turned to leave, only to catch Corvian's eye in passing. Corvian offered a charming bow. "You have my deepest gratitude." Seconds later, the red-hot stench of stockpiled coin and sealed magic washed over him as the massive vault door swung open. Inside lay heaps of casks, chests and sacks, silver crowns glinting in torchlight, and at the back, a smaller chest carved from ebony and bound with bands of adamantine, the House Velskor safe. Morella strummed a low chord on her lute. Bren's shovel haft slid into her hand beneath a sleeve. With a practiced flick, she struck the chest's lock. Sparks flew. Corvian drew the grimoire and murmured a binding, "Lock to ash and rune to flame. Yield your secret, break your claim." A page fluttered, and the lock exploded inward in a gout of inkwell black flame. Corvian opened the lid, revealing neatly stacked purses of coins stitched with House Velskor's crest, and at the bottom, a single iron key stamped with an arcane sigil. He lifted the key, feeling its power hum in tandem with the dragon's heart. "Time to go," he whispered. He snapped the lid shut and replaced the chest. Bren tapped the door runes to reseal the ward. Lisette wiped loose rust from the lock's hinge. Morella closed her ledger with a flourish. They departed the vault as silently as they had entered, leaving behind a motive, Velskor's magic oil, far more tempting than the stolen coin. Outside, the cashier blinked and murmured to a clerk. "Must have been a memory glitch. No consignment today." "No." The clerk shrugged and resumed his ledger work. Corvian and his companions slipped into the dock's labyrinth of alleys, the iron key tucked in his palm's pocket. He exhaled the silk trader's lingering accent and let his own shadow settle back into place. "Well done," he said, passing the key to Lisette. "This opens the undervault beneath the fortress of where they store artifacts beyond mortal eyes." "Undervault?" Brun's eyebrow arched. "You mean that old Shenyu door rumored to guard the Witch King's bone?" Corvian's grin was sharp. "Legend says those bones whisper the secrets of pre-Empire alchemy." He shrugged, the grimoire heavier on his shoulder. "But first, a stop at the Great Masquerade this very eve. You did not think I'd miss the seasonal ball held atop the Serpent's Tower, did you?" Mirella chuckled, tucking her lute away. "Where high-born rogues and masked viscounts gather. Most delightful." Lisette cracked her knuckles. "Best be charming, Corvian. We'll need new faces after tonight." As dusk bled into night, Tidehaven's grand plazas glittered with lanterns and floating lantern boats. The Serpent's Tower rose at the city's heart, a twisting spire wrapped in iron-leaf balcony. Entrance required a mask of gold filigree, a detail Corvian supplied with a swift flick of his own stolen memories. By nightfall, he and his trio wove through throngs of dancers, merchants in velvet cloaks, and jewel-handed magister. At the topmost gallery, beneath a domed roof of stained glass, a harpist's song wove through scented breezes. Corbian slipped between mirrored columns until he found the host, Lady Eleonora Vesh, merchant princess of Crystal Haven, known for her lavish entertainments and clandestine bids for arcane relics. She greeted him with a perma-smile and a hand of jeweled bone. "Corbian Alderan," she crooned, his assumed aim perfect on her lips. "I've heard you brokered a shipment of midnight lotus from Devamar. Do tell more." Corbian bowed, letting his borrowed soul memories shimmer behind his eyes. "My dear Lady Vesh, your reputation precedes you. If anyone can procure the lotus, it is your house. But I might know, a cave of cavern lotus guarded by husks of bone. Share that knowledge, and we both profit." He offered the ebony key from Velskor's safe. Her eyes glittered. "Ah," she said, touching the key, "the undervault key. So you truly are resourceful." She winked at her courtiers and swept him toward the tower's spiral stair. "Come, I shall introduce you to the Archmage Regent. He too seeks the Lotus of Devamar for its power to transform base metals." Corbian followed, heart thrumming. He'd never been so near the Archmage Regent, a living legend said to wield spells that could sing sea monsters to sleep. Tonight he would glean, not only the Regent's ambitions, but the precise location of the cave's hidden vault, all while Lady Vesh, perennially flirtatious, distracted the Regent with laughter and gauzy reputation-spun tales. On the stairs landing, the Archmage Regent awaited a tall figure in storm blue robes, staff crowned with a levitating crystal orb. His eyes, pale and unblinking, measured Corbian with unsettling calm. "Lord Alderan," he intoned, voice echoing like caught wind. "I understand you hold the key to the undervault. May I see it?" Corbian offered the iron key with perfect courtesy. The Regent turned it in his gloved hand, then tapped it thrice against his staff. A rune burned white on the key's head. "Impressive," he murmured. "Very few can slip past the guild ward, and fewer still can disarm the undervault's seal." He handed the key back. "Inform me when you wish to enter. For now, share your tale of the Lotus, and you shall have my arcane escort." Corbian's grin was hidden by mask, but in his veins he felt a fresh ember of power. Seal step invocation. A new rite gleaned from Varelia's memory, allowing him to bypass arcane wards without warning. He inclined his head. "By your mercy, Regent, I would be honored." As they descended back into the ballroom's glow, Lady Vesh whispered in Corbian's ear, "You are most charming, Lord Alderan. We shall dine tomorrow. Your cave, my escort, and whatever treasures we unearth." She pressed a jeweled glove to his arm. Corbian bowed, heart alight. "I eagerly await it, Lady Vesh." He turned away, scanning the crowd. Beneath his mask was a man who had walked tombs by moonlight and commanded ghosts by grimoire, now dancing lightly atop Serpent's Tower with the city's most powerful. The road to stronger than anyone else had never seemed so golden glowed. As the harp's final note faded into the night's promise, Corbian slipped his gaze to where the masked revelers pressed close. He felt the souls within him stoke his blood into quick fire. Soon he would venture to the undervault, gather its buried lore, and ascend another step up the Predator's chain. But for tonight, he would embrace the revel, the laughter, the swirling gowns, the clink of wineglass against silver. From grave robber to soul prowler to highborn guest, Corbian had tasted ambition's sweetest wine, and he would drink deep, his danger-soaked eyes hidden behind filigreed gold, until every secret of Tidehaven, every whispered legend and locked vault, lay open before him. Thus the next chapter of the Wanderer of Souls began. Not in dust and bone, but in candlelit splendor, where the world's riches smiled, and never guessed the necromancer's air danced among them, twisting stolen memories like ribbons, igniting souls for power, and sharpening every cunning edge on the promise of the next great seize. And in the smoky haze of the ballroom's final revel, Corbian grave robber, necromancer's heir, adventurer stepped lightly into his next masquerade. Soul flames flickering behind a golden mask, he awoke before dawn in a gilded guest chamber atop the Serpent's Tower, the soft strains of Morella's harp drifting through the corridor. Dawn's first light filtered through narrow arched windows, glancing off the ivory walls etched with leyline rune. Corbian sat up on the silken mattress, fingertips brushing the smooth iron key that lay atop his night table. Today he would breach the undervault beneath the fortress of a secret tomb whispered to hold relics of the Witch King and scrolls of pre-Empire arcana. In the chamber next door, Lisette stepped lightly into the corridor, boots soft on the tapestry runner. Bren followed, mat roll clasped in one hand, shovel at her hip. Morella peered last, lute cradled against her chest, silver hair braided with rune thread. "All set?" Corbian asked, slipping the key into his coat pocket. The grimoire, cracked leather, worn smooth by countless hands, dangled at his belt. Lisette nodded. The regent's galley waits below. We'll slip aboard with his guard. At midday, Bryn confirmed. Just after the tides change, when the undervault's outer locks are replaced, she tapped her map roll. The tower's aqueduct feeds beneath the fortress. A sluice gate down there leads to the hidden crypt. Morella offered a brisk nod. And I can play the lullaby of sealing. Learned from Borelia's shade. Should surface, it buys us time. Corvian smiled. Excellent, let's not keep the Witch King waiting. By the time the fortress's drawbridge clattered open, the sun had climbed its zenith. Corvian, draped in a charcoal cloak to conceal the echoes of his silk trader guise, descended winding staircases to the inner harbor. The Archmage Regent stood on the quay, staff in hand, robes trailing in a breeze, scented with brine and sulfur. 2 sentinels of ivory bone mail stood guard. Lord Aldarin the Regent called, voice carrying over the quay. Ready for the guided tour? Corvian inclined his head. Lead on, Your Excellency. As they walked the stone-paved dock, Corvian noted how the Regent's gait was deliberate, each step measured. The Regent paused before a fleet of slate-hulled galleys, charmed to navigate glass seas. This one's ours, he said, gesturing to a narrow vessel emblazoned with the wolf's sigil. We depart in an hour. Good timing. You'll have the sluice gate to yourselves until then. Lisette produced a forged letter bearing the Regent's seal, gleaming silver blue, a mark that opened doors without question. A guard raised a brow, but saluted crisply when Corvian handed over the letter. Soon they were aboard the Wolf's Sigil, sails unfurling above them, oars stilled in their thole pins. Corvian leaned on the rail, watching the fortress walls recede through morning haze. He felt the Witch King's bones stir in memory, vague whispers of a warlord who had once commanded armies of the dead, whose secrets lay buried beneath centuries of dust. The Regent's galley cut a silent wake as it threaded narrow channels of coral and basalt, guiding them to a hidden inlet near the fortress's southern buttress. Here, the Regent said, voice low. He handed Corvian a sealed flask of brine red oil. Corrode the sluice's valve, and the tide will retract for exactly 7 minutes. Then it resets. Enough time to slip below. He studied Corvian's face. Be swift and careful. The undervault does not forgive trespass. Corvian nodded. He took the flask. Thank you, Reed. He passed a glance to Morella and Bren, who readied lanterns of soul glass, sealed against ward flare. Lisette checked her dagger's edges. In the hush, only gull calls echo. With a nod from the Regent, Corvian lifted the flask and poured its contents over a rusted valve wheel set into the stone wall at water level. The oil hissed, seeping into the mechanism's seam. Corvian whispered the seal step invocation. Learned from Dorelia's lore, by circle spun in moonlit tomb. Corrode the seals that ward this room. By ash and flame, and tide's retreat. Open the path beneath our feet. A faint click echoed from within the sluice gate's housing. The tide receded with a dull roar, water draining into submerged culverts. The wolf's sigil drifted backward until the inlet lay empty of all but damp stone and drifting seaweed. Corvian raised his lantern. We move. Beneath the inlet, carved stone steps descended into darkness. Corvian led the way, grimoire in one hand, lantern in the other. Watermarks climbed the walls, pale rings of efflorescence, and the air smelled of brine and stale necromancy. Echoes of drip and distant rumble accompanied each step. At the bottom, they entered a narrow tunnel whose walls were carved with scenes of deathless wars. Skeleton legions, marching under crimson moons, dragon wraiths breathing ash fire, a monarch enthroned on a mound of shattered bone. Corvian traced one carving with a fingertip, a rune he recognized as the final lock of the undervault. He held up the iron key and fitted it into a carved skull's jaw. The tunnel's walls trembled, and half of the bone lock slid aside to reveal a portcullis of serrated ivory. Brain exhaled. Only a single gate to go. Beyond the ivory portcullis lay a vaulted hall hung with tattered banners embroidered in silver thread. The Witch King's standard, still bearing the ragged sigil of a skeletal hawk. Torches flared spontaneously as Corvian stepped inside, revealing rows of alcoves where iron-shackled urns held ash-gray remains. A cold presence stirred in the air, the lingering will of a necromancer's masterpiece. Corvian lifted his lantern to a wall-mounted scroll case bound in runic clasp. With a single verse from Borelia's grimoire, he disengaged the clasp and withdrew a brittle parchment. The spell of echoed obedience, a ritual to bend restless urns to a single will. He pressed the scroll to his lips, whispered its chant, and the urn's lids rattled. 20 ghostly wraiths soared from the urns, flickers of soul in half-formed shape, and joined in a ring around Corvian's lantern. Mirella gasped, the Witch King's captives. Corvian let the wraiths swirl at his back, an entourage of half-light. He stepped forward, lantern in one hand, open grimoire in the other. At the hall's end stood a sarcophagus of black marble, iron-bound and rune-carved. The skeletal hawk's sigil was stamped in gold on its lid. He approached with steady step. "By this key," he murmured, placing the iron key in the rune lock, "and by the echoed obedience be unbound." The sarcophagus lid rattled, rising on hidden gears until the Witch King's remains lay revealed. Bones bleached white, robes frayed to thread, a crown of necrotic iron encircling empty eye sockets. Corvian felt the residual pulse, a spark of royal intention that had bound these remains in silent dominion. He laid a gloved hand on the spine of the coffin and invoked the rite of memory harvest. "Kings of bone, your memories behind, flee into light, and leave power refined. Show me your secrets." Spellcraft groaned, and grant the crownless watcher bone. A silver haze welled from the Witch King's skull, swirling into Corvian's palms. Memories flooded him, tens of thousands of dead marching at the Witch King's command. The forging of the crown of necrosis, which bound souls into labor. The final cataclysm that shattered the realm, scarring the land in soul flame. Corvian staggered under the weight of century. Through the haze, a new vision blossomed. The Witch King's spectral dominion, a high-level technique allowing him to animate an army of wraiths with a single gesture, and Crown of Endless Embers, a spell that turned battlefield souls into living bonfires. Corvian's eyes gleamed with hungry triumph, but as the final memory poured in, a shard of doubt seared through him. The Witch King's last thought, "I would give all to reclaim my mortal heart." Corvian closed his eyes, inhaled raggedly and broke the ritual's flow. The haze shuddered, memories receding like tide. He exhaled, palms slick with ectoplasm. He had enough high-level spells to sear mountains or raise armies, but he had kept his mercy sparing the Witch King's remnants from utter oblivion. Bryn stepped forward and pressed a ground seal rune. The sarcophagus lid clanged back into place, runes sealing it once more. The wraiths sighed, broken and freed, then spiraled back into their urns, silent once more. Corvian pocketed the new bone tokens, 4 in total, and fitted the iron key into his belt. He turned to face his companions, voice steady though his limbs trembled. "Let's depart." They retraced their steps up the stair tunnels. The tide gate reset by noon's incoming sea. At the top, the regent awaited in his ebony robes. "Did you learn what you sought?" he asked. Eyes gleamed. Corvian inclined his head. "More than that. I have the spectral dominion, the crown of endless embers, and the subtle mercy to spare even the Witch King's shade." He offered the regent a curt bow. "Shall we discuss a share?" The regent's lips curved in a thin smile. "A mutually beneficial arrangement, as always." He extended a signed parchment offering Corvian an official but secret writ of necromantic exploration, granting him immunity within the Empire's borders in exchange for occasional intelligence on dangerous necromancy. Corvian signed at once, indulging a rare flicker of genuine satisfaction. In the afternoon sun, they strolled through Tidehaven's sunlit plazas, Corvian's steps lighter than they'd been in years, with the Undervault's spoils, powerful new spells, deep necromantic techniques, and the Archivist's writ. He had vaulted beyond every mortal predator and rival. Soon, no kingdom's throne would hold secrets beyond his grasp, but he would not rest in luxury. He had Phoenix Ash from Emberroot, Storm Iron from Skyforge, the Seed of Stone, the Tide Gem, the Regent's Ward, and now the Witch King's crown power. Ahead lay haunted ruins in the desert of lost whispers, the abyssal hollow beneath the southern mountains, and the gathering of the arcane conclave. Each would yield a new soul, a new memory, a new rung on the ladder to omnipotence. As the sun set, Corvian returned to the Serpent's Tower, ascending its spiral balconies to the ballroom. Morella's laughter echoed once more, Bren's new runded shovel glinting at her hip, Lizette's coin purse jangling with fresh gold. Corvian released his final borrowed guise and allowed his own shadow to settle, a tall figure in Planeswalker's cloak, eyes bright with cunning and flame. He raised a glass of spiced ale to his companions. To power beyond the highest hill, Morella clinked her goblet, and to memories well kept, Bren tapped her shovel on the floor, and to the mercy that saved us all, Lizette grinned, knives dangling at her belt, and to the next great adventure, Corvian smiled, soul flames flickering behind his gaze. Then let us onward, into dawn and dust, into ruin and revelry. We will be the architects of our own legends. The candlelight danced, laughter spilled into the night, and Corvian felt something he had never known in moonlit tombs. Hope, not for compassion, but for the endless horizon of possibilities his newfound power would carve. For even as the worlds lay balanced, there remained one truth. A grave robber who ate souls for breakfast does not stop until he rules the skies themselves. And thus he strode into night, the final chapter of one journey ending, the next rising like a flame against the dark. And so, under the watchful eyes of silvered stars, Corvian the soul ignited set his sights ever higher, ready to kindle new legends in his wake. his cunning, his merciless drive, all bound by the relentless hunger to rise beyond the top step of power's ladder, and to burn every obstacle in spectral flame. Corvian left Serpent's Tower before first light, his cloak heavy with the amulets and wards he had amassed, the storm iron ingot, the ember root vine shard, the tide gem, the seed of stone, and the Witch King's bone tokens now tucked into a hidden pouch. At his side rested the grimoire of Queen Verelia, its pages still humming with necromantic promise. Beyond the tower's coral walls, the sea breeze carried him to the sloop, where storm-boned sailors nodded farewell. Their oars dipped into glass-like waves, and soon Corvian stood at the docks of Tidehaven, dusting off his boots before setting out on the eastern road. The morning sun grew hotter with every mile as he traversed flat fields dotted with scrub pines, then deeper into dry hills pocked with sinkholes and crumbling watchtowers. By midday he reached the fringes of the Desert of Lost Whispers, a vast expanse of pale dunes so fine they shifted at the slightest breeze. Legend said the desert held half-formed spirits that clung to sand-buried bones, moaning in the wind. Corvian knelt and touched the ground, tasting a faint memory of a caravan massacre centuries old. He smirked. This would provide at least one worthy soul. He walked until dusk, each hour the sun burning deeper auburn. Temperatures soared, sweat dripped beneath his cloak. When shadows stretched long, he saw the outlines of a caravan at the crest of a ridge, dozens of covered wagons drawn by humped camels, painted in glowing ochre and azure. Flags snapped in the breeze. Corvian shaded his eyes. Among them rode a halfling merchant, shrouded in veils of gauzy linen, her eyes bright as desert stars. He approached under pretense of a lost traveler. The halfling regarded him with wary curiosity. "Name and purpose," she said, voice rich with practiced authority. "Corvian Aldrin," he replied smoothly, recalling the silk trader guise, "seeking passage across the dunes. I can pay passage if permitted." He laid a handful of silver crowns on a wagon bed. The halfling, Kira the veiled merchant, smiled beneath her veils. She waved a slender hand and nodded. "A fair offer. We cross at dawn. Tonight you camp with the Sandsong caravan." He settled in among merchants, mercenaries, and guide gnome. Bryn took watch at his side, while Lisette bartered for spicy stew. Morella composed a ballad on her lute, the notes rising over the crackle of fire. Corvian felt warmth he had not in months, protection in numbers, companionship in the deep desert. But he remembered the scores of souls waiting beneath drifting sands, and he savored the hope of more power. At midnight, under a sky strewn with stars, the caravan set forth. Camels trudged between dune crest and hollow, lanterns swinging like captive moon. Corvian watched Kira's silhouette on the lead camel, a halfling perched proud and serene, her veils rippling in lamplight. She guided them along a road only she knew, past yawning sinkholes filled with black water, along a narrow crest where whisper wraiths roamed. Soon ghostly forms emerged at the dune's edges, faint shapes with hollow eye sockets that drifted on silent wings. Merchants gasped, guides readied spears. Corvian placed a hand on Kira's camel's flank and whispered to her. She nodded and raised a hand to signal. As the wraith circled, he recalled the spectral dominion technique gleaned from the Witch King's bones. A single gesture could bind lesser shades into obedience. He extended both hands, palms outward, and spoke the binding invocation. "By crown of bones and ashes spent, I seal your will and bind your scent. By necropolis and moonlit flame, I claim your name and quell your bane." The wraiths faltered, their forms flickering. Then, one by one, they swooped around Corvian, hissing faint harmonics, and settled along the caravan's flanks as silent guards. The whisper wraiths became a living wall of vigilance, scanning the dunes for greater threats. The merchants exhaled in relief. Kira exhaled as well, her veiled head inclining in approval. By dawn's first light, the caravan reached the crest overlooking the Lost Whisper ruins, tumbling sandstone walls, half buried in dunes, banded in red and gold. Corvian disembarked, the grimoire thudding softly at his hip, and turned back to Kira. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Your guidance cost you naught, I hope." Kira's laughter was like tinkling bronze. "The desert keeps some debt. Stay with us until the ruins are safe. No need to die for power's sake." Corvian inclined his head, slipping into his own robes of sand silk. Agreed. They entered the ruins as the sun climbed columns of sandstone upthrust like bones, arches spanning emptiness, shattered courtyards half filled with dust. In the heart of the ruins stood a circular plaza paved in mosaic, depicting a covenant between dragonkind and man. Humans bowing before a golden worm, offering tribute of jeweled stones. At the plaza's center lay a shattered altar of black marble, its surface fissured and stained. Corvian knelt, pressed his lantern to one side and felt the stir of souls beneath his fingertips. Hundreds of ghost spots lingered, memories of an ancient alliance, broken in betrayal, of priests slaughtered and dragon seeds stolen. He let the soul flare step carry him across the plaza so that he arrived before the altar in a heartbeat of flame. He set down the grimoire and lit a handful of spectral silver powder, ash-like residue from Queen Borelia's ritual, and let it drift across the cracks in the altar. Candles placed in alcoves flared, tracing runes that hummed to life. From the altar's core crawled three figures, slender wraiths in priestly garb, silver-eyed and crowned with circlets of bone. Their shrieks filled the plaza as they drifted forward. Corvian ignored the other. He knelt before the central crack, lantern in one hand, free palm bare. He opened the grimoire and found the rite of memory harvest, then spoke the words with precision. Spirits bound in ancient vow, lend me your eyes, reveal your how. By crown of light and shard of bone, show me the art this world has thrown. A gale of memory wind exploded around him. Visions swirled, priest invoking dragon feral packs, wormlings hatching in molten caves, the betrayal that shattered the covenant, leaving souls trapped between scales and stone. Among the shutters of vision he glimpsed a final technique. Dracol Echo, an invocation that summoned a dragon's ghost to fight at the caster's side. Corvian staggered upright, heart racing. The priest wraiths hovered still, wait. He extended both hands, lantern light and soul flame coalescing into his first true tribute, a respite. The rite of mercy's binding washed over the wraiths, sealing their sorrow and granting them release. They dissolved in silver motes, leaving behind a pale dragon scale token, etched with the draconic word for echo. Bren and Lasset approached, eyes wide. Another technique, Lasset breathed. You'll shatter a dozen city walls with that. Corvian tucked the token into his pouch, where the set of stone and coral wards jingled. The world needs no more walls shattered. I only need to command enough power to remain unbound by any threat. He rose and surveyed the ruins, where choir joined them from behind a shattered arch. There is more beneath the sand, a tunnel system leading to the dragon's gullet, a sealed cavern said to hold the bones of the first worm. If you wish to test Dracol Echo, that is where Corvian's eyes narrowed. Then we go. The caravan remounted. As the sands shifted beneath dawn's sun, Corvian allowed himself one glance at Choir's veiled profile. Among desert merchants, halflings, lizard folk and even a slender tiefling alchemist, he had found a rare kinship. He smiled. Not all souls needed burning. Some he chose to guard, with companions behind him and worlds before him. He strode again into the unknown, hunger for power tempered by the first true embers of loyalty. And so he left the desert of lost whispers, driving deeper into uncharted sands with the Sandsong caravan as his guide. Soul flames flickering behind his eyes, ready to kindle new legends in the vault of dragon bones and the ruins of the first worm. Each step carried him closer to mastery. Each acquired memory a spark in the inferno of his destiny, and Corvian the soul ignited walked on, merciless to obstacles yet merciful to those he chose to protect. The greatest grave robber the realms had ever known. The sands pressed like flour in the midday heat, shifting beneath the caravan's wheels as Corvian steered the Sandsong wagons toward a yawning swale marked on Choir's map. The gullet of Wems, once a lava tube carved by primordial fire and later sealed by devout priests, was now half revealed by eroded dunes. According to legend, it held the scattered bones of Maranthrax, the first worm, whose skull alone was said large enough to shelter a village. Corvian surveyed the horizon through narrowed eyes, testing the wind for telltale whispers of hollow places below. The desert had no patience for the unprepared. That evening, under burning amber sky, the caravan halted at the gullet's rim. A crack in the sandstone wall opened into darkness, a vertical shaft rimmed with jagged stone. Overhead, twin moons glimmered in early rising, their pale light contrasting with the desert's dying ember. Choir and her caravan set camp at a respectful distance, offering Corvian and his companions quiet passage. Once you're inside, Choir instructed, voice low over the crackle of campfire. You have no more than an hour's worth of fresh air before the tube's natural vents close. We'll raise the alarm if you don't return by then. Corvian inclined his head. He checked his gear. The grimoire, fresh lantern oil, soul glass lantern, wards and belt pouches, and a coiled length of rope with grappling hook. Ryan loaded an oilskin satchel with rations. Morella cradled her lute. Lisette smoothed her veil and secured a hidden dagger. Corvian drew the Witch King's bone tokens and laid them in a small leather pouch. One token for each compass point of the cavern that might hold secrets beyond mortal ken. At the crack's rim, he pressed the storm iron ingot to a carved glyph and whispered Varelia's sealing formula. The rubble lining the entrance shifted outward in silent recoil, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward. Corvian stepped first, the grimoire's leather strap creaking as he lowered himself into darkness. The air was thick with stale breath and powdery stone dust. Their lanterns flickered as they descended, light cutting through gloom to reveal walls striated in black basalt and blood-red quartz veins. At the bottom lay a broad corridor, some 20 paces across, spanned by broken columns carved in dragon-scale patterns. Ominous hush pressed it. Corvian's heart hammered. He set the soul glass lantern on a broken pillar. "Stay close," he whispered. "No illusions here, just bones and echo." They advanced along the corridor's center, where the floor was inset with a mosaic of shattered tiles depicting a contorted worm clutching twin moons. Corvian recognized the glyph as a binding seal, long since broken, meant to keep the first worm's essence from spilling into the world. He reached into his pouch and retrieved the coral vine shard from Emberroot, fitting it into a carved recess at the mosaic's edge. The glyph glowed faint green as the vine's runic power seared into rock, reinforcing the threshold. Beneath a shattered archway, the corridor opened into a vast chamber, the Cathedral of Bones. Hundreds of colossal ribs arched overhead, draping the ceiling like the inside of an immense beast's carcass. The floor lay scattered with drifted sands and shattered ossicles. In concentric circles at the center lay a pile of massive bones, the remains of the first worm. Its skull, nearly 30 feet long, sat at the pile's apex, one gaping eye socket staring empty into the dim torchlight. Corvian felt a tremor underfoot and saw Lizette swallow sharply. "By the gods," she breathed. Morella's hand shook as she lifted her lantern to the skull's forehead, revealing carved runes worn by time. Corvian studied them, a ward of containment, spells woven to trap a worm's soul spark within its bones until the world grew balanced once more. But centuries of collapse had cracked the magic. Corvian dusted a finger across the runes, feeling them pulse weakly. He laid the Witch King's spectral silver powder in a circle around the base of the skull, where the rune formed a trap. "Now for the ritual hearth," Corvian said. He placed the storm iron ingot on a flat vertebra, then set the tide gem and lightning-etched ingot in cardinal positions around the circle. Rin laid the emberroot vine across the western quadrant, and Morella opened her grimoire to the rite of worm soul harvest. From bone and ash, from scale and sand, draw forth the spark, now bound in hand. Reveal to me your ancient art, echo of flame and soul apart. Corvian clasped his hands above the circle. The lantern of soul glass flared, opening the threshold to ephemeral realms. In response, the worm's skull trembled and a deep resonant growl rolled through the chamber. Ghostly baritones coalesced above the ossuary, an exhalation of primordial power. In that moment Corvian channeled the Drake Call echo. He raised his voice in the draconic tongue, calling the first worm's spectral form into being. A hurricane of phantom flame burst from the skull, the bones themselves ablaze in ethereal fire, as a colossal worm wraith materialized above the pile. Its body was a swirl of golden ember and gleaming bone, wings outstretched in silent fury. Lizette stumbled back, Bryn's shovel lowered in awe. Morella gasped. Corvian stepped forward, heart racing. The worm's jaws unhinged in a roar that echoed through soul and stone. Corvian held his ground, unbowed. By spark of bone and ember's breath, he shouted, voice carrying on the worm's tremors, "Bind your fury at my call. Stand as my sentinel, tethered by flame and soul." In an instant the worm's spectral fire blinked to a steady glow, and its thunderous form stilled above the circled relics. It coiled, head lowered, eyes smoldering with recognition, an echo of memory granted him by the ritual. Corvian saw images flash, the first worm's last flight over a dying world. The moment its heart spark was trapped by mortal sorcery, the longing for release. Corvian bowed his head. "I claim your power. Guard me with your storm." The worm's spirit form contracted to a manageable size, its length reduced to 20 paces, wings folded, but the presence remained titanic. It circled Corvian 3 times, then settled behind him, a silent guardian of ghost fire. With the worm's spirit bound, the ritual hearth completed its cycle. The tide gem pulsed with blue light, the vine shard glowed green, the iron ingot hummed with storm electricity, the ember root vine faintly flickered, the bone tokens shone with ivory gleam. The entire circle radiated warmth and power. Corvian felt new techniques bloom behind his ribs. Worm's Aegis, a shield of spectral flame. Bone Fury Strike, an effect that augments physical blows with necrotic verve. Stormworm Flight, a limiter lift that grants him brief flight on stormwind. He exhaled and closed the grimoire. The worm's spirit bowed its head once, emitting a low hiss of satisfaction, before fading into the hatch beneath the ribark ceiling. The bones sank into silent repose. The chamber regained its stillness. Curvian surveyed his companion. "Let's not linger," he said. "The desert wind will soon reclaim this place." They retraced their steps along the bone ribs and basalt striations, each carrying fresh wards, the worm's spectral scale token pressed into Curvian's satchel beside the other. Outside, the dunes glowed beneath fading moonlight. The tide was beginning to shift. Curvian paused at the entrance. Car's cautious face emerged from the sands beyond. "Did you find what you came for?" she asked. Curvian held up the grimoire. "More than I dared hope." He approached and offered Karasur a bone shard etched with worm glyph. "Your caravan's vigil allowed me this boon. Take this as payment." Karasur pressed the shard to her palm and closed her eyes. "You have my respect, Soul Harvester," she said, voice warm. "May your storm guard protect you." Curvian inclined his head and returned her respect in kind. Then he and his companions descended to the splintered Kars, where the tide gate's sluice once again opened with the incoming sea. The Stormbone sloop waited at the lip of the inlet, its oars raised, ready. Curvian boarded, the desert wind buffeting his cloak. As the sloop eased back toward Tidehaven's outer harbor, Curvian studied the honey-gold horizon. He had harvested the first worm's power. He had bound a spectral army of shade. He had stolen memories that could unmake armies and reshape mountains. Soon he would venture to the abyssal hollow beneath the southern mountains, rumored to hold the shattered heart of the world's earliest titan. Beyond that lay the arcane conclave in the capital, an assembly of sovereign magi whose secrets alone outshone any buried tomb. But first, he would return to the lighthouse tower for one last appointment with the Archange Regent, an arrangement he had forged in Tidehaven's shadowy politics. He would propose an exchange, the Witch King's final crown of embers, for the Regent's assistance in opening the abyssal hollow's seat. In the teeth of competing power, Curvian needed all alliances he could secure. He stood at the prow, lantern off now that moonlight suffused the glass sea. The worm spirit's fire glowed faint behind his eyes, a reminder of raw power residing within bone and flame. His companions gathered around him, each illuminated by that same promise of more. Morella's lute rested at her side. Lisette's daggers gleamed. Bryn's shovel bore fresh runic shards. Together, they were a fellowship forged in crypts and caravans, bound by memory and ambition alike. Curvian inhaled the salt-driven breeze. The world stretched before him in dawn's promise. He had once been a grave robber scraping the earth for forgotten treasures. Now he commanded spirits, wielded ancient necromancy, and walked pathways once reserved for gods and kings. No final enemy awaited him, only endless horizons and the relentless pursuit of ever higher power. And so he sailed toward the rising sun, the wolf sigil cutting a silent path through glassy waters, carrying Curvian the soul ignited onward, always onward, toward the next secret buried beneath bone and stone, toward the next technique that would set him apart, until he stood above all others in might and mastery. Under the twin moon's fading glow, he whispered his own vow, a simple promise: "I will not stop climbing." And with that he slipped into destiny's sunrise, power thrumming through every step of his relentless ascent. The wolf sigil slipped into Tidehaven's harbor as dawn unfurled golden light across slate-hued waves. Curvian stood at the stern, cloak drawn against the sea breeze, grimoire strapped to his belt, and the Witch King's bone tokens nestled in a hidden pouch. Behind him, his companions prepared to disembark. Morella's lute was sheathed, Bryn's shovel secured, and Lisette's eyes gleamed with the thrill of their desert exploit. Before them lay the coral-hewn quay, and beyond it the ivory spire of the lighthouse tower piercing the morning sky like a sentinel of promise. The Archmage, Regent, awaited at the foot of the tower's granite steps, robes of storm blue trailing in the salt-tinged wind. Beside him stood two ivory male sentinels and a pair of gilded warders armed with polished staves. As the sloop's gangplank lowered, the Regent inclined his head. "Lord Aldurin," he called, voice echoing against coral walls, "welcome back. I trust your desert venture proved fruitful." Curvian stepped ashore, boots ringing on the stone pier. "Indeed," he replied, "I bring the Witch King's crown of endless embers, his final techniques, and the key to unlock even deeper secrets." He produced the coral vine shard and skull token, bowing as he extended them. The Regent examined the tokens in his gloved hand, glittering scarlet embers flickering in the crown shard, and ivory bone etched with draconic runes. A smile curved the Regent's lips. "Impressive," he said. "You have recovered power that eluded my scholars for centuries. In return, I will grant you exclusive access to the grand archives of Blackstone Citadel and the ritual needed to breach the abyssal hollow beneath the southern mountains." Curvian inclined his head. "Your generosity befits your reputation." They ascended the tower's spiral stairs, the Regent leading the way through arching halls lined with rimmed glass that flashed storm-born lightning at dawn's touch. At the summit lay the Grand Archives, a circular chamber ringed by towering shelves of vellum scrolls, bound codices and crystalline orbs that hovered in silent rotation. Archivists in dark robes consulted floating text streams, and the air hummed with arcane resin. This is the heart of Imperial lore, the Regent intoned. Within these tomes lie the original rites used to seal the Abyssal Hollow, and the formula to unbind it. He led Corvian before a pedestal of black marble carved with twin spirals. Upon it rested a single dust-grimed scroll. The Regent drew it free and unrolled it carefully, revealing arcane diagrams and ancient glyphs. You will need to combine this rite with a living catalyst, the Regent explained. The sap of the Death Willow tree found only in the Shadow Vale, mixed with the Witch King's crown ash, and imbued with the First Worm's spectral flame. Only then will the Abyssal Seal respond. Corvian studied the scroll's diagrams, a circular summoning symbol overlaid with geometric wards, annotated margin notes in the Regent's hand. Each step detailed: carve the seal glyph into living stone, burn the catalyst within a pale moon brazier, recite the rite of echoing obedience to bind the hollow's essence, and then call the Oblivion Key, the final keystroke to open the vault. Beneath the script, a stern warning: beware the Leviathan's maw. Corvian cradled the scroll. I understand. He looked to his companions. Shadowvale for Death Willow, then straight to the Abyssal Hollow. The Regent nodded. And I will have my ship ready in Tidehaven's Grand Harbor. Sail south under my guard, and I shall lend my arcane ward to your endeavor. He extended a quill for Corvian's seal. Corvian signed with fluid confidence, affixing his mark beside the Regent's. With their pact sealed, Corvian and company descended the tower steps. Lizette quirked an eyebrow. Shadowvale's no garden stroll. She hefted her dagger. We'll need supplies. Bren grunted. We'll stop at Hammerfall, gather living wood lanterns, spiced hides, and perhaps a guide who knows Death Willow. Morella tuned her lute. And I will craft a lament song to still the wood's shifting branches. Corvian allowed himself a rare smile. Excellent. We depart at first moonrise. Hammerfall lay 2 days' ride southward, across rolling hills dotted with black pines and smoked granite outcroppings. Corvian procured horse-drawn wagons, one laden with provisions, the other rigged as a mobile arcane hearth. For rite preparation, Curious Sandsong Caravan offered to escort them beyond Tidehaven's borders, ensuring safety across the lawless lowlands. They set out at dusk, the road lit by moon gems hung from wagon frame. Each night they camped beneath open skies, stoking coals of dragon bone charcoal and gathering rare herbs for the catalyst. In Hammerfall, the town's workshop for living wood lanterns glowed emerald, carved root hollows of petrified bark lit by bioluminescent moss. Corvian bartered for 2 large lanterns to illuminate the Abyssal Seal's chamber. Bren procured spiked bracers of tempered steel. Lizette secured fresh leathers to ward off entangling vines. Morella collected fungal inks to scribe summoning circles on salted parchment. Corvian spent Hammerfall's market day gathering a guide, a wiry hunter named Eris Softbane, rumored to have tracked Death Willow in the Shadow Vale's depths. Eris's eyes flicked to the bone tokens at Corvian's belt, but she blinked. You have ties to the dead, she said, pulling a dagger free to test its balance. Will do, she added. As dawn broke, they headed southeast into the Shadow Vale, a melancholy forest of ash-tipped trees whose branches wept with dew like tears. The air was thick with drifting spores and half-heard whispers, the voices of spirits bound within the wood. Corvian pressed a hand to a gnarled trunk and felt a tangle of memories. Once this forest had been golden and breezy. Now it lay in penumbra, haunted by war dead seeking peace. Eris led them through narrow paths glimmering with fungus bloom until they reached the Death Willow Grove, a circle of trees whose silver bark exuded thick sap like tears whenever the wind sighed. Eris held a small clay bowl beneath a droplet. This is it, she said, voice soft. 1 drop will fill your flask. Corvian tilted his ale leather phial and caught a sudden rivulet of sap. It tasted of moonlight and rotten flesh, potent magic swirling beneath its sweetness. He sealed the phial and handed the leftover bowl to Lisette. Thank you, guide. Eris nodded. Now for the hollow. They traversed the morgue of the land, broken hills, collapsed ridges, and shallow caves that stank of sulfur and bone. Corvian consulted the Regent's scroll under a sky smeared with blood-red clouds, signs of ancient tectonic unrest. Breen scouted ahead with Eris, Lisette flanked them for protection, and Morella's mute lute hummed an echo charm to still malignant echoes. At last, they reached the Abyssal Hollow's mouth. A yawning shaft in a crimson cliff face, half concealed by black lichen and rotten vine. A carved arch overhead bore the binding glyph, a twin spiral of sun and moon, carved deep into bleeding sandstone. Corvian traced one spiral with the grimoire's bone silver ink, and spoke the first lines of the Regent's rite of unbinding. Spirits bound by girth of earth, rise and quell your silent dearth, by crown ash, scale and ember flare. Open the maw and breathe hot air. As he chanted, the vines recoiled, and the arch's oval aperture widened like a mouth inhaling. Behind them, the wind dampened, a heavy silence settled. Corvian adjusted the living wood lanterns along the arch's base, their soft green glow mingling with the blood-red sky. He arranged the week's rituals. Pour the death willow sap into a brazier of crown ash. Set the storm iron ingot upon the azimuth. Ignite the first warm spectral flame to spark the final invocation. He lit the brazier, the soy-thick sap hissed and vaporized, launching acrid smoke into the hollow. Corvian recited the regent's final incantation. Gate of stone, gate of yore, split your seal and show the core. Let echoed key ignite the breach, and freedom grant to realms in reach. He raised the Witch King's bone ash in a leather glove and scattered it across the brazier's ember. The coals flared white-hot. Then, with steady hands, he uncorked the phial of death willow sap, its surface gleaming like quicksilver, and let it stream into the brazier. A flare of blinding light engulfed him, as living vapor exploded into flame, and the crown ash ignited in spectral blaze. Corvian staggered back, shielding his eyes, feeling the world twist in the aftermath of raw magic. When the flare subsided, the ground trembled underfoot. The arch's carved runes glowed, and a muscled groove split the sandstone floor, like a gaping wound. From the new fissure wafted a draft of subterranean warmth, scented with brimstone and hidden rain. Corvian exhaled, voice catching. It worked. He motioned to Bryn and Lisette, and they edged forward. The arch now bridged into a descending tunnel of polished onyx and fire-veined quartz. The lantern light trembled on walls far above their heads. Corvian stood at the tunnel's lip, letting the wind of the hollow's depths wash over him. He felt a thrumming beneath his boots, like the pulse of a buried heart. Stay alert, he whispered. This place remembers pain. They ventured into the throat of the hollow, each step stirring whispers of forgotten titans. The floor sloped steeply, forcing them to lean forward against the pull of sheer descent. After a dozen paces, they found themselves in a colossal chamber, domed ceiling vaulted on ribs of living stone that glowed with lava-red veins. A river of molten rock curved through the center like a draconic vein, its light dancing in Corvian's lantern's reflection. Across the molten river lay a dais of black heartstone, upon which rested a single massive bone, the shattered heart of the world's earliest titan. The bone glimmered with half-life, as though longing for new purpose. Corvian's breath caught at its sight. He had only just mastered the first worm's remains, and now the titan's essence lay before him. He drew the bone tokens, Worm Shard, Witch King's token, Spectral Guardian's bone, and Crown Ash, and placed them in a circle around the heart bone. Each token glowed, emerald, scarlet, ivory, ember. Corvian rummaged in his pack for the last worm's Kiamiat, rubbed it to a shine and set it at the circle's center. He opened the grimoire to the rite of primordial recall, a spell described in halting margin notes penned by the regent's precursor. Heart of stone, blood of earth, reveal your first eternal birth. By ember's spark and bone's command, let ancient will awaken land. He struck flint against steel, igniting a live flare of star-white flame at the circle's center. The molten river hissed as gasps of steam hissed upward. Runes carved in the heart bone pulsed like a buried pulse, and the bone tokens flared in turn, each a heartbeat of memory. The ground quaked, a roar like the cracking of world spines thundered through the hollow. Corvian's soul flame ignited in his veins. He raised both hands and recited the final invocation. From ash and soil, from tide and gale, join me in this forging spell. By essence first and breath of last, unseal your power from the past. A geyser of molten light erupted from the heart bone, weaving a column of living flame that shot into the dome above. The spectral lightning of storm iron crackled around the molten river. Vines of ember root coiled into the bone's fractures. Spectral echoes of worm fire danced on Heartbone's ridges. Draconic wisdom from Crown Ash burned around the circle's rim. In that moment, the Heartbone shattered in silent bloom, each fragment caught in the elemental swirl and bound into Corvian's very marrow. He felt a wave of power so vast it nearly bowled him to the ground. Primordial confluence, the ability to command the four elements and necrotic flame at once, a symphony of raw creation. His eyes flared with inner storm, his blood burned with molten memory. As the elemental energies subsided, Corvian sank to one knee, chest heaving, every fiber of his being alight with potential. His companions reached for him, steadying him against the quake. The molten river and heartbone fragments faded into dull embers. The tokens lay spent but intact. "You've done it," Lisette whispered. "You've outdone yourself." Corvian's voice was hoarse. "And so our journey's end nears." He pressed a hand to his flaming ribs. "With this I stand above every mage and warlord in this realm. No one can match me." His gaze flicked to the darkness beyond the das. "Except, the heart itself demands vigilance. You saw its power. We cannot let it be misused." Brain nodded. We'll seal the heart's fragments back in their tokens and hide them. Mirella added softly. We'll write laments of the hollow's silence, so none forget the cost. Corvian rose, staff straight and renewed by destiny's fire. Then we go. Blackstone Citadel awaits, and the arcane conclave's vaults beyond. With that, they retreated up the molten corridor, scars of the hollow's heat lingering on their skin. Outside, the desert dusk glowed beneath twin moons, as the howl of wind through canyon mouths sang their triumph. The sands would shift again, dunes reclaiming the gullet's mouth, but their legacy lay sealed in tokens and memory. Martial rites more potent than any fortress or army. At the surface, the caravan's guards did not expect them until sunrise. Corvian mounted his horse, the specter wraiths he had bound in Fenmarsh, drifting to his side once more, silent as living shadows. With a final glance at the looming ridges of the Shadow Vale beyond, he nudged his mount eastward. The world spread before him an unbroken horizon, each road leading to greater wonders. The crystal archives of the Conclave, the spire fortresses of the Highland regents, and the hidden tomb beneath the frozen north, where the last god's bones lay entombed. Corvian's laughter trailed behind him, echoing across wind-blown dunes. The grave robber who once scraped life by moonlight had ascended beyond his wildest dreams. No rival could stand against him, no enemy could bound his soul. He was Corvian's soul ignited, necromancer's heir, wormbinder, titan-bearer, and the world itself would tremble beneath the weight of his ambition. And so, under rising twin moons and burning horizon, he rode into legend's next chapter, unyielding, unbowed, and never to be denied. Dawn's first glimmer crested over Tidehaven's ramparts by the time Corvian and his companions rode into the outer bailey of Blackstone Citadel. Massive granite walls, carved with the intertwined sigils of the Empire's founding dragonlords and the symbols of the arcane conclave, loomed against the pale sky. Corvian paused at the sallyport, brushing sand from his cloak, and let the ghost wraiths he had bound in Fenmarsh drift ahead as silent sentinels. His horse shifted restlessly, nostrils flaring at the scent of stone iron and old magic. Lizette rode at his flank, eyes bright with anticipation, while Bryn's gauntleted hand never strayed far from her shovel's haft. Morella's lute was slung across her back like a war banner of song. Corvian's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the promise of forbidden lore. Within these walls lay the Conclave's grand repository, rumored to house tomes of world-shaping sorcery, demon-binding grimoires, and the lost journals of antiquity's greatest archmages. More than that, the Conclave's doors opened only to the highest-ranking mages, or those bearing the Regent's writ, which Corvian now carried, signed and sealed in indelible arcane ink. They dismounted in the courtyard, arching overhead, with dragonbone ribbing and festooned with banners of azure flame, violet rune and silver spiral. A pair of ivory male sentinels at the massive oaken gate bowed when Corvian presented the Regent's writ. The writ crackled as he broke the seal, and the gate's iron studs glowed faintly before swinging inward on silent hinges. The courtyard beyond was ringed by three wings, the council hall to the north, the library keep to the east, and the astral observatory to the west. Corvian led his group toward the library keep, whose carved doors bore a mosaic of semi-precious stones depicting the Conclave's founding oath. In knowledge shall we find power, in power shall we find unity. The doors opened at his touch, warded to recognize the Regent's mark, and they passed into a vast foyer of polished obsidian tile. Lanterns of living wood cast emerald light over spiral staircases, rising to slender balconies from which countless scrolls and codices hung on braided iron rail. An archivist in deep indigo robes awaited them beneath an arch of carved runes. His eyes were pale, reflective as polished bone. "Welcome, Lord Aldarin," he intoned. "The Conclave honors the Regent's endorsement. May your purpose here advance mutual mastery. Please, follow me to the council hall for your introduction." Corvian inclined his head. "Thank you," he said. The archivist beckoned, and they ascended to the council hall, a domed chamber thrumming with latent magic. Velvet-draped benches rose in concentric tiers around a central dais of white marble. On the dais stood 6 figures, members of the conclave arrayed in robes of crimson, emerald, sapphire, onyx, ivory, and gold. At their center sat the conclave's archmagip, an imposing woman in platinum weave robes, her hair the hue of moonlight. "Lord Aldarin," she greeted, voice like rippling crystal. "The conclave thanks you for your service to the realm. I am Archmage Selendra, keeper of sealed lore. We understand you seek the right of the abyssal seal, that you might restore balance in the hollow beneath the southern cliffs." Corvian knelt, offering the scroll from the Regent. "Archmage Selendra, I carry the Regent's grant. My purpose is to secure the seal's unbinding while ensuring that power remains contained and cannot be used for conquest." Selendra's silver eyes fixed him, then she nodded. "A worthy aim. However, to study the rite, you must swear the oath of silent binding." never to share this knowledge except in service to the Conclave's cause. She unfurled a slender scroll of vellum, script swirling in living ink. Do you accept these terms? Corvian glanced to his companions. Morella's hawk-eyed affirmation, Bren's firm nod, Lisette's eager grin, then signed the oath with careful strokes. The Conclave's members placed their hands to the dace's runic rim, and a soft pulse of light sealed his vow. Solyndra drew the scroll close. You may proceed to the lower vault. She turned, signaling 2 wardens to escort them. They followed the wardens down a grand spiral staircase carved from pure black stone, runes of warding, glowing pale blue at every tread. At the bottom lay a heavy door of pearlescent ivory, bound in silver filigree and pronged with dragonbone spikes. One warden produced a crystalline key etched with Conclave's sigil, unlocking the door with a resonant tone that quivered through the stone. Beyond lay the lower vault, an octagonal chamber lit by crystalline kegs of still luminescent air. Along each wall stood alcoves housing sealed tombs of historical archmages, honored heroes, and one empty niche bearing the label, Rite of Abyssal Opening. Corvian's heart thumped as Solyndra approached the empty niche. From her robes she drew a slender black scroll case bound in dragon catalysts, and approached a circular floor glyph at the center of the vault. This is the seal glyph's counterpart, Solyndra explained. Carve the ritual symbol here, using the provided chisel, then we will supply the catalyst, Death Willow Sap, Witch King's Crown Ash, First Worm Embers. She gestured to a warden, who produced a small iron-bound chest. Corvian stepped forward, withdrew the chisel and mallet, and set to work. Each groove he carved sparked faint silver flame as his bone ink traced the symbol precisely. Within minutes the glyph shimmered into life. Corvian wiped sweat from his brow. It is done. Solyndra shifted the chest. Begin the rite. She opened the chest, revealing a phial of sap, a pouch of crown ash, and a cluster of ember glow coals. Corvian guided her hands. First pour the sap into a brazier of crown ash, then drop 1 ember spark into the mixture. He recited the invocation in a low, clear voice, each word in koboldic arcane, by root of death and crown of flame, let earth release its hidden name, from bone to air, from light to deep, reveal the path that seals now keep. A pulse of warmth shivered through the vault, the air stained red with chakra-white flame, the floor glyph flared azure, and a hidden panel slid aside to reveal a narrow tunnel spiraling downward. Corvian exhaled. I have the opening. Solyndra nodded. Proceed, but recall your oath. Share not this rite beyond these walls. She gestured. May wisdom guide your steps. Morella hung back, cradling her lute as if preparing a vigil song. Bryn drew her shovel, gloved hand tightening on the haft. Lisette's dagger gleamed at her belt. Corvian led the way into the tunnel, the wardens following closely. They descended for what felt like an hour, the spiraling corridor broadening until it opened into the Cavern of Echoes. A vast hall where molten rivers of black obsidian ran between basalt pillars carved with ancient dragon rune. Steam hissed from fissures in the ceiling, and the air shimmered with heat. Across the chasm, a great iron door length of a war elephant stood between them and the abyssal hollow proper. The door bore a carved scene of a chained leviathan, its tail lashing against a crescent moon. At the door's base lay a locked pedestal, 5 shallow dishes ringed in silver etched with the elemental glyphs of air, fire, water, earth and spirit. Corvian removed his coral vine shard, imbued with emberroot magic, and placed it in the earth dish. It glowed faint green. He put the storm iron ingot in the air dish, which hummed with lightning blue. He set the tide gem in the water dish, shimmering deep azure. He sprinkled a pinch of crown ash into the fire dish, which flared red gold. Finally, he laid the first worm's spectral shard in spirit's dish, which pulsed silver. The moment all 5 tokens sat in place, the cavern trembled. The door's carved leviathan uncoiled. Its tail snapped upward and the door swung inward on invisible hinges with a grinding roar that echoed like thunder. Beyond lay a yawning abyss, a chasm of swirling shadows and distant fire-lit peaks beneath an inverted night sky. Corvian's lantern revealed a narrow bridge of living crystal stretching across it, shimmering with phosphorescent veins. He stepped forward, soul wraiths drifting close behind, and the party followed. Bren's shovel raised, Lisette's daggers at the ready, Morella's lullaby humming in anticipation. Halfway across the bridge quivered, black tendrils of shadow snaked from below, seeking to ensnare their ankles. Corvian halted and drew the grimoire from his belt, flipping to Varelia's spell of purging orb. By flame of soul and bones lament, cast out the night that binds descent. From embers spark to seared array, let shadows burn and wraiths decay. He raised his free hand, ignited soulfire on his palm, and cast it at the tendrils. They hissed and recoiled into nothing. the bridge stabilized, he resumed the crossing, heart pounding in the hollow's cold breath. At the chasm's far side, the tunnel yawned downward into the abyssal hollow proper, a place spoken of only in broken tongues and terrified whispers. The air turned cold and thick with sickly green luminescence. Along the walls, half-formed statues of basalt imprinted the shapes of fallen titans. In the air drifted the moans of 1,000 lost souls, trapped between flesh and oblivion. Corvian inhaled. His companions set lanterns on rune-etched sconces, illuminating the path. At the tunnel's end stood the chamber of the Leviathan's heart, a circular vault lined with watertight seals and floodgates, center of the world's primordial birthplace. In its basin lay the shattered sacred orb of ocean memory, a sphere of living water that once held the Leviathan's lifeblood. Broken into 5 shards, it had scattered across the deep and been lost in time. Corvian approached the basin's edge, layout matching the seal glyph outside the fortress. He retrieved from his pouch the bone tokens once used on the Heart of Stone and Worm's Heart. Now he would apply them to the Leviathan's basin. The Witch King's token for spirit, the Ember Root shard for earth, the Tide Gem for water, the Crown Ash emblem for fire, and the Storm Iron ingot for air. He paused. This final ritual would restore the Leviathan's memory, unlocking a power so vast it could reshape seas. But he would bind it to his will, turning that force into a specter guard against any who would threaten the realm. No mercy would extend to those who dared challenge him thereafter. He laid each token in its place. As before, each glowed an elemental hue. The basin's water stilled, then rose in a column of pale green light vibrating with half-mad moans. Corvian opened the grimoire to the right of Leviathan's echo. Heart of abyss, cradle of flood, grant your strength to flesh and blood. By crown and fang, and bone and flame, grant me your might as I proclaim. His voice rang clear in the vault. The water column roared into liquid storm, dripping onto the tokens. For a breath, Corvian felt the Leviathan's own will press against his mind, a primal, churning intelligence older than stars. It tried to assert itself, to crash through his mind and reclaim its memory. Corvian's hand glowed with soul flame, and he grounded himself against the tomb's sealing runes. In a single pulse of command, he unleashed Leviathan's command, a spell learned partially from the Witch King's memories and fully extended through the Crown Act. He spoke an undersea tongue, syllables soaked with arcane force. Leviathan of depths profound, in my soul your echo bound. Swell in bone and storm and fire, stand as my shield, drowned in desire. The water column collapsed inward, swirling around Corvian in a vortex of water and flame. His body shimmered with layered energies, molten ember, draconic flame, roaring currents, storm winds, earth's echo, and the woven tapestry of souls he had consumed. Then, in an eruption of light, the Leviathan's memory veils shattered, and a being of ghost water, titanic in scale but ethereal in substance, emerged from the basin. It towered above the group, serpentine coils of spectral liquid, eyes like molten pearls. Corvian met its gaze. I name you Sentinel of the Covenant. Stand by my side, master of abyssal power. His voice was steady, unwavering despite the Leviathan's presence. The creature's form flowed, then coalesced into a serpent of half-light, nodding its tail behind Corvian's back in a gesture of allegiance. Behind him, Bryn let out a low whistle. Lizette's mouth hung open. Morella's lute hummed in odd response. Corvian's chest heaved with exhilaration. He had done the unthinkable, bound the essence of a sea god to his will. He could feel its power coiling within him, a tide of possibility destined to reshape coastlines or calm storm-lashed seas. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the union of soul, flame, stone, storm life and abyss settle into his marrow. When he opened them, he smiled. Our work is complete. He turned to the conclave's wardens, who had followed them at a cautious distance. Return the Leviathan's basin to seal once more. Do not speak of this to any beyond the Archmagia and the region. The wardens inclined their heads as Corvian retreated, leading his companions back across the crystal bridge, through the molten rivers of the Carolingian Hall, and up the white ivory doors of Blackstone Citadel. The Archmagia regent awaited them once more in the council hall, eyes widened, robes streaming arcane energy. You have surpassed every expectation, the regent proclaimed. The conclave owes you a boundless debt. With the abyssal echo we may quell any ocean wrath, tame storm giants, and protect all coasts. But tell me, what will your final boon be? Corvian's eyes glittered with silent ambition. I will not ask for coin or titles, he replied. I claim the Archivist's eye exclusive control of the conclave's layered wards and seals. With it, no secret within these walls will remain hidden from me. Solendra's silver gaze flared. She stood behind the regent. A bold request, she said quietly. The Archivist's eye is granted only to council members, but none have earned it as you have. So be it. She lifted a slender jade orb set with a single blacklit gem. Accept this, Corvian of Soulfort. May the eye illuminate every shadow in your path, yet never betray your oath to the conclave. Corvian bowed his head and accepted the orb, feeling it pulse beneath his palm. In its depths he saw every archive corridor in the citadel, wards, spells, hidden vaults and pathways of knowledge that no mortal had traversed. He slipped it into his pouch beside the other tokens, feeling completeness settle into his bone. As the conclave's members rose to applaud, Corvian allowed himself a moment of true triumph. A grave robber risen to master of souls, necromancer's heir, wormbinder, leviathan sentinel, titan's echo, and now archivist's eye-bearer. No enemy remained beyond his reach. No secret remained beyond his grasp. No power exceeded his claim. He turned to his companions. Lizette's glance was proud, Bryn's jaw firm, Morella's eyes bright with song. We go now, he said softly, to shape the world as we see fit. And so, under the vaulted dome of runded glass and the bright approval of the conclave's greatest, Corvian the soul-ignited strode forth. No longer a mere grave robber, but the utmost sovereign of buried secrets, unbound power and merciless ambition. His ascent had reached the pinnacle of mortal magic. The realm itself would tremble beneath the measure of his will, and beyond that only legends loomed, waiting for his flame to touch them into being. Blackstone Citadel's towering spires receded behind Corvian as he rode the regent's gilded barge down the moonlit canal toward the Silver Council's harbor. The archivist's eye nestled against his chest, and the heart of the first worm pulsed with spectral light beneath his cloak. His companions followed in two smaller skiffs, Morella's loot case doubling his helm's post, Bryn's shovel stowed by her side, Lisette's eyes scanning the canal banks for thieves. Corvian allowed himself a rare moment of calm, yet beneath that calm lay a tangle of schemes and ambition. The regent sat opposite Corvian on a cushioned bench of sea-green silk. Between them, the canal's water glittered with reflected torchlight, and the faint tracery of warding runes carved into the quay's stones. Your ascent has been unprecedented, the regent said, voice low. With the archivist's eye, you hold the keys to every conclave vault. But power invites envy and intrigue. You must choose your next steps with care. Corvian inclined his head. I seek not only knowledge, but the means to shape fate itself. The Leviathan's echo, the worm's aegis, the Titan's confluence, all serve that aim. My next objective lies beyond mortal politics. The obsidian spire of Morkarath. The regent's eyes narrowed. The spire of shadows, a fortress of void magic sealed by ancient covenant. None have returned from its blackened halls. Corvian's lips curved. Then I shall be the first. He traced a fingertip over the archivist's eye. With these vaults at my command, I will unearth the lost grimoire of endless night within its depths, and wield its power to bend void itself to my will. The regent rumbled a laugh. Ambitious. Very well. I will commission a flotilla of warded barges to carry your force across the Ebon marshes to Morkarath's cliffs. But beware. The spire's guardians are bound by curses older than the Empire. You will need more than borrowed souls and elemental pact. Corvian nodded in agreement, and rose to his feet, barge staff in hand. Then I will gather allies, mercenaries of the Starfall Legion, the exiled vampire prince of Lorraine, and perhaps a spy from the Iron Council. We will storm the spire together. The regent's brows lift formidable company. But remember, loyalty among such rarities is fleeting. Trust no one entirely. Corvian allowed a brief smile, nor they me. Over the next fortnight, Corvian assembled his expedition. In the Starfall Legion's courtyard, he bartered the Crown Ash artifact for a cohort of veteran swordsmen, whose courage was rivaled only by their discretion. In the opulent court of Prince Halvor of Lorraine, he offered the Leviathan's command as tribute in exchange for 10 vampire knights sworn to his blood oath. And in the smoky back chambers of the Iron Council's conclave, he secured a network of informants with the promise of shelter within the Citadel's vaults. Each bargain forged new bonds and new risks. He did not bind these allies with necromantic chains. Instead, he exploited their ambitions through shards of stolen memory. He impersonated each retainer's confidant through the echo of lost voices, reading their darkest desires and whispering promises tailored to their hunger. In each case, the allies swore their blade to his cause, unaware they followed a master of souls rather than a mere mortal. At twilight on the waning moon, the flotilla set sail from Silver Council's harbor. Barges of polished ebony and hurricane-warded sails cut through the Ebon Marsh's fetid waters, their hulls trailing phosphorescent wake. Corvian walked the bow of the flagship. The mask of endless night dawned at his helm, an obsidian visage carved with void glyphs that concealed his expression. Morella's sleep song lulled the water sprites as the flotilla passed. Bryn and Lisette manned the rafts alongside vampire knights whose pale eyes glimmered at each marshlight. As dawn approached, the marsh's dull mists parted to reveal the jagged cliffs of Morkarat. Towering spines of volcanic glass clawed the smoky sky. A single black obelisk crowned the highest peak. Below, the marsh gave way to cracked basalt plains, where ash swamps fumed and embers glowed in cold fissures. Corvian's pulse quickened. This was the realm of Void's Edge, where mortal magic frayed against abyssal hunger. He raised the mask of Endless Night and spoke the way spell of Stonebreaker, a transmutation that opened a hidden path through the cliff. A basalt panel slid aside, revealing a narrow tunnel carved in sudden geometric perfection. Corvian descended first, the mask's runes glinting with void spark behind him, followed his allied contingents, torches ablaze against the encroaching dark. The tunnel opened into a circular cavern ringed with arcane pillars of obsidian black. Within each pillar burned a pale flame of void light flickering with unnatural gravity. Pressure hummed through the air, and every footstep echoed like a heartbeat in a tomb. Corvian advanced to the cavern's center, where a dais of pitch crystal bore a single sarcophagus of polished onyx. Etched upon its lid was the sigil of Morkarat's founding warlock, an Ouroboros of coiling shadow and light. Corvian placed a hand on the crystal dais and recited Varelia's binding rhyme in reverse. Summoned by the archivist's eye, blood of dragon, bone of shade, open seal that time has made, spire of void, your heart I claim, release the night, fulfill my name. The void flames on the pillars roared to life, sucking the torch's flame to embers. The sarcophagus lid quaked, then slid aside in grinding silence. Inside lay the grimoire of Endless Night, its cover stitched from living shadow and studded with ivory shards of abyssal bone. The air around it shimmered with potential spells of void-crafted walls, necro-void binding, and the art of erasing memory itself. Corvian stroked the grimoire's cover, feeling the pulse of unspoken power thrumming beneath his gloved palm. He gripped it and lifted it free. At that moment the cavern's void flames coalesced into 6 ghostly sentinels, pale wraiths in hooded robes, eyes empty voids. They approached in silent patrol. Morella whispered a note into the mask's auditory channel, calling on the lullaby of sealing. The wraiths hesitated as her song drifted through the cavern like a siren's embrace. Corvian seized that moment to invoke his final rite for the spire. Shadowborn, no longer roam. Claim these bones as warded home. Bind your might to mortal vow. Stand sentinel until I bow. His palm glowed with spectral flame, an echo of Dracul's power, unleashing a wave of conjured void that coalesced around the wraiths. Their forms froze, then solidified into loyal guardians bound to Corvian's command. The grimoire of Endless Night lay quiet in his arms, its weight both promise and peril. Behind him, Bryn surveyed the cavern's exit. Lisette slipped the mask's chain into her grip, eyes bright with predatory smirk. Morella's lullaby faded as she packed away her loot, mouth curling in satisfaction. Corvian turned to face the assembled allies. The Starfall Legion swordsmen stood ready. Vampire knights flexed pale fingers, Iron Council spies melted into the back of the cavern. Atop the dais, Corvian held the grimoire aloft. With this I claim the spire's power. Let none challenge the soul-ignited's dominion. A shout echoed back from the marsh's edge, choir's warning horn signaling that the tide of allies must retreat or be trapped as the spire's seal reformed. Corvian's command of Leviathan rippled through the cavern, parting the void pillars and opening the way back to the tunnel. The flotilla's horn answered, horns of barges echoing along the marsh fin. With a final binding glance at the cavern's void guardians, Corvian led the charge back through obsidian corridors. The grimoire of Endless Night clutched to his chest. As the first torches flickered in the distant marshland, he felt the weight of his amassed powers settle around his shoulders like a living cloak. Souls ignited, elemental forces mastered, ancient spells consumed, void magic bound, and his legacy sealed in every bone token and arcane script he commanded. Above him, the twin moons rose, their pale light shining on a man transformed. Corvian, the soul-ignited heir of necromancers, binder of titans, lord of wraiths, sentinel of dragons, and master of endless night. The world trembled beneath his stride as he strode toward the awaiting flotilla, grimoire and archive's eye in hand, prepared at last to ascend from mortal ambition to mythic singularity. And as the barges set sail for distant shores, Corvian allowed himself a single whisper, half vow, half prophecy. No power stands beyond my reach. The barge that bore Corvian and his company slid beneath Blackstone Citadel's lowest aqueducts at dawn, emerging into the Grand Canal that divided the capital. The city's silver spires rose on either bank, gilded obelisks and marble towers reflecting the first orange rays of morning. Merchants on floating markets hawked pastel silks and crystal smoked fish. Skyships drifted overhead on taut sails. Every corner of the city hummed with ambition, yet none suspected how closely the threads of power had already been rewoven. Corvian disembarked at the conclave's rear quay, the archivist's eyes safe in his pouch and the grimoire of endless night strapped to his back. He paused to steady his breathing. The ritual to bind the Leviathan spirit within his will still pulsed through his veins, a tidal echo that steadied his heart and sharpened his thought. Beside him, Lisette's cloak shimmered with hidden daggers. Bryn's shovel void of tool felt solid, reassuring. Morella's presence glowed with silent song. They passed through a side entrance guarded by ivory male sentries, whose eyes widened at Corvian's mask and the regent's Inside, the corridors of ivory and onyx opened into a vaulted antechamber hung with stained glass windows depicting the conclave's greatest victories. Archivists paused in their reading, ghostly tongues rising before settling back to silence. Corvian led the way up an ornate staircase, fingering the eye's gem and recalling each secret passage he had marked with its gaze. At the top, the council hall doors loomed, carved with the twin spiral of creation and dissolution that defined the conclave's charter. Corvian drew a breath and pushed the doors open. Within, the council members had assembled in full regalia, 6 archmagi arrayed in robes of sapphire, jade, onyx, ruby, gold and violet, seated on high-backed chairs of living wood. The archmagi, Cylindra, perched at the apex, platinum hair gleaming. All conversation ceased. Eyes turned to Corvian as he stepped onto the dais. The hush deepened, and only Morella's lute remained unused beneath her arm. Archmagi Cylindra inclined her head. Lord Alberine returned. You have worked miracles. The abyssal seal opened, the silent spire breached, the grimoire of endless night obtained. Yet now we must decide your next station. Will you take your place among us, or serve the regent as his adjunct? Silence stretched between the pillars. Corvian let it settle before replying in clear tones. I do not serve another. I have fulfilled the regent's writ and the conclave's oath. Now I stand before you as a sovereign of the Soulforge, the Worm's Aegis, the Leviathan's command in the Titan's conflict. I claim my seat at the Council's center keeper of forbidden lore, and demand that my authority over the archives be recognized by all present. A murmur rose among the archmagi. The ruby-robed mage banged her staff on the dais. Preposterous. You seek the archivist's eye, the grimoire of endless night, and the vaults of Morkarath, yet you pledge no fealty to the conclave. Corvian's voice remained smooth. My fealty is to knowledge and power balanced by the wisdom to wield them. You have bound me by oath, yet I bound myself by unrivaled accomplishment. Let no ambition blind the council to its own purpose to safeguard the realm's magic. The sapphire-robed archmage rose, eyes like storm-racked seas. And how, soul-ignited, do you propose to guard these powers? Will you share every secret you uncover? Will you answer every summon at the council's behest? Your title belies your youth and unconventional methods. Corvian's gaze never wavered. Every technique I have acquired has served the realm, defending Tidehaven from phantom beasts, bolstering Kerosian's forges, binding the gullet's Leviathan, sealing the abyssal hollow. Will you deny me the ability to continue this work? The violet-robed archmage, a tall woman with onyx eyes, stepped forward. The conclave values your feats, but we cannot allow one man to accumulate all knowledge. Magic's darkness can consume as readily as it illuminates. With a slight gesture, Corvian produced from his cloak a thin silver mirror, a relic from the Citadel's hidden vault of shadows. He held it aloft so that every archmage saw their own reflections in its polished face. Then view your own ambitions within this mirror, he said. You covet power, conceal secrets, strike bargains behind veiled walls. I have no need to steal your knowledge. I offer instead to unify the conclave's scattered lore under a single purpose, to protect the realm from threats both mortal and spectral. If you fear me, elevate me to your center, then you may see every page I read, every ritual I cast, and stand as witness to my deeds. Cylindra's lips pressed into a thin line. The onyx-robed mage's gaze flicked between the mirror of reflective guilt and Corvian. The regent, who had silently entered behind them, approached the dais. Enough, the regent said, voice resonant. He placed a hand on the mirror's edge, and its surface shimmered out of focus. We have judged you, Lord Alderane, and found you worthy. You shall sit at the council's heart, keeper of the grand archives, with the archivist's eye to guide you. But know this, your seat is not unassailable. Should you betray our trust, the conclave's martial wards will strike you as a traitor. Corvian inclined his head. So be it. He stepped aside, and the regent lifted the mirror. Its reflections sharpened, and the archroge exchanged murmured obeisance before resuming their seat. Selendra peered at Corvian, a shadow of respect in her silver eyes. "Welcome to the council," she said, and seated herself at the daïs's center. Corvian took the vacant chair beside her, its arms carved in dragon bone and onyx. He laid the grimoire of Endless Night on the carved stone table, feeling its power hum beneath his fingertips. One by one, after brief silent ceremony, the archroge recognized his authority with nods and murmured greeting. As the council's deliberations began discussing funding for border wards, deference to the emperor's edicts, and the fate of minor guilds, Corvian leaned back in his chair, soulward and eye glinting, and listened. He learned of rising cults in the eastern jungles that worship the shadow moon, of elemental rifts in the northern wastes, of an upsurge of spirit hauntings near Emberroot. Each threatened the realm, each would be his next opportunity. When the council's meeting broke for midday repast, Selendra stepped to Corvian's side beneath the vaulted rafters. "You have done well," she said quietly, "but beware, not all here share your vision. Some will plot to strip you of your eye, destroy the grimoire, or worse, trust no one fully." Corvian nodded. "Then I will forge alliances of my own. The Regent stands with me. The Starfall Legion will defend the archives, the Vampire Prince owes me his sword blades, and the Iron Council's web of spies will protect us from covert threats." Selendra cast a glance back at the chamber. "Then let us dine and let the world see the conclave united. You will stand beside me at the grand banquet this eve beneath the silver spires. There you may unveil the Leviathan Sentinel, make clear the power the conclave now commands." Corvian allowed a small smile. "I look forward to it." That evening, the Silver Spire's banquet hall flared with torchlight and music. Long tables of polished driftwood gleamed with chalices of amber wine and platters of jade-hued fruits. Nobles and dignitaries from every land dipped to greet the newly appointed keeper of the archive. Gold-embroidered banners of the conclave fluttered overhead. Corvian entered beside Selendra, the mask of Endless Night tucked under his arm. Behind him, hidden in the shadows of the balcony, stood his allied contingents, legionnaires in polished steel, vampire knights in black silver plate, Iron Council spies mingling with merchants, and Kyre's halflings as discreet observers. At the dais, the regent motioned and silence fell. Corvian stepped forward, drawing the mask into his hand and letting the face of living shadow hang around his neck like an occult medallion. His voice carried through the hall without need of magic. Esteemed members of the Empire Crown's Guard, Conclave's Magi, and honored guests, I stand before you as evidence that the world's latent powers have awakened in our time. Tonight, I present the Leviathan Sentinel, bound by my will to serve the realm's defense. He raised a hand, and the mask's void glyphs shimmered in living light. From the balcony's shadows, the Leviathan's spectral form slithered down the wall, scales dripping ghost water yet burning with pale green flame. Gasps ran through the gathered crowd as the creature coiled at Corvian's feet, a silent sentinel of abyssal command. Corvian extended his hand and the Leviathan bowed its head. I pledge its might to guard the coastlines from terror, sea monsters, monstrous tides and shadow wraiths alike. Let no foe challenge the Empire's shores. The hall erupted in applause. Generals thumped their shields, diplomats bowed, noblewomen curtsied. Even the Iron Council's spies exchanged respectful nods. The regent rose, pouring crystal wine into Corvian's chalice. To the keeper of the archives he toasted, "May your watch be ever vigilant." Glasses clinked. The Archmagi offered toasts in every elemental tongue. Selendra leaned in, voice warm. "Your demonstration has sealed your position. None dare challenge you now." Corvian sipped the wine, feeling its warmth settle over him. He allowed himself a moment of genuine satisfaction, yet his mind remained alert to the unspoken glances exchanged among certain Archmagi in onyx robes. Trust, like rare magic, required constant tending. As the banquet progressed, Corvian mingled with representatives from across the realm, trading news of cult movements, sharing rumors of the Obsidian Spire's Void Ward, and hinting at the secrets he might unveil next. He accepted invitations to dine at the governor's palace, to guest lecture at the Arcanum Academy, and to host a private viewing of the grimoire's most forbidden pages. Each invitation expanded his influence. Each whispered promise deepened his dominion. When the feast's last notes faded into the organ's gentle chords, Corvian slipped away under the pretext of consulting Selendra in her private sanctum. There, he retrieved from the regal vault a small chest containing 3 jade crystals, each etched with primal runes of warding. He wrapped them in velvet and concealed them within his cloak's folds. When he emerged, he was once again just the keeper of the archives, the honored guest, the face of calm authority. Outside, moonlight glittered off the silver spires, and the midnight breeze carried the last strains of revelers' laughter through the empty streets. Corvian paused atop a balcony, balancing the grimoire in one hand, the archivist's eye in the other, and gazed at the constellations arranged above the city's flickering lights. Beyond those lights lay the abyssal hollow, the obsidian spire, and the next great bastion of forgotten lore awaiting his claim. He closed his eyes briefly, savoring the heady taste of triumph. Then, with deliberate grace, he slipped the grimoire into the night's shadows and descended the tower's stairs, each footstep echoing with the unspoken vow that had guided him since the tomb of the first necromancer. To rise from the ash of grave robbery, to claim dominion over souls, secrets in the very elements themselves, and thus beneath the silver spire's silent watch, Corvian the soul ignited walked onward into greater legend, boundless ambition, and the uncharted nexus of power that none but he dared command.